Okay, let's dive into one of the biggest and most rapid movements of people in American history. It's an incredible story of how 6 million people completely reshaped the country, not by crossing oceans, but by crossing state lines. Yeah, that's really the heart of it, isn't it? I mean, imagine packing up everything you own, saying goodbye to the only home you've ever known, and starting over hundreds of miles away. This is the story of a journey that didn't just change families, it changed the entire nation. So to really get this journey, we have to start with what people were leaving. What was life actually like for African Americans in the South in the early part of the 20th century? Well, for African Americans in the South, life was defined by a system called Jim Crow. Now, this wasn't just a general attitude of unfairness. These were actual laws written down that forced strict racial separation in almost every part of life. The reasons people left were incredibly powerful. We call them push factors. Think about it. The farm economy was collapsing, partly because of a nasty little bug called the boll weevil that destroyed cotton crops. On top of that, you had a deeply unjust system with underfunded schools and the constant threat of violence. It was a tough, tough situation. Okay, so people weren't just running from all those hardships. That's only half the story. They were also being pulled towards the promise of something better up north. And a huge catalyst for this was World War I. All of a sudden, with so many workers away at war, factories in the North were facing a massive labor shortage. Industries in cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Pittsburgh desperately needed people for their steel mills and auto plants. So they started looking south. Get this. Recruiters would go south, promising wages of up to $5 a day. Now, I know that doesn't sound like much to us, but for a sharecropper who might only make a few $100s for an entire year's work, $5 a day was life-changing money. It's also really important to note that this migration didn't happen all at once. It really came in two huge waves. The first one kicked off around World War I because of those factory jobs, and then the second, even bigger wave started up during World War II, thanks to the boom in defense industries. The train really became the symbol of this whole journey. For hundreds of thousands of families, this was it. This was the machine that carried them away from everything they knew, with maybe just a suitcase or two, but a whole lot of hope. But the journey didn't just end when the train pulled into the station. Arriving in these massive, noisy cities like Chicago or New York was a total culture shock. A whole new chapter, with its own set of challenges, was just getting started. Life in the North was, well, it was complicated. On the one hand, there were these incredible new freedoms. You could vote, your kids could go to better funded schools, and you weren't living under those formal segregation laws. But on the other hand, people face new problems, like really crowded housing, high rent, and a different, more hidden kind of racism and job discrimination. But here's where things get really amazing. Amidst all those challenges, something incredible happened. When you bring so many creative people from different backgrounds together in these new, concentrated communities, you get a spark. In this case, you got a full-on cultural explosion. And that cultural boom got a name: the Harlem Renaissance. It was centered in the New York neighborhood of Harlem, and it was this golden age for African-American artists, writers, and musicians. For the first time, their work was getting attention all across the country and even around the world. You can really think of it as having three main pillars. In literature, you had writers telling these powerful personal stories. In music, jazz and the blues just exploded out of the clubs and became America's soundtrack. And in art, you had painters capturing all the energy and struggle of this new urban life. And the music itself actually changed. The quiet, acoustic country blues from the Mississippi Delta that people brought with them on the trains, well, it got plugged in. It got amplified in the loud clubs of Chicago. It turned into this gritty, electric Chicago blues that would go on to influence just about everything, including rock and roll. So when you look at the big picture, the Great Migration wasn't just a collection of individual stories. It was a shift in population so massive that it permanently redrew the cultural and political map of the United States. The legacy of this movement is absolutely everywhere today. It reshaped the culture of almost every major American city, it created new centers of Black political power, and gave rise to a new generation of leaders who would go on to spearhead the civil rights movement. And honestly, that's not an exaggeration. It's a fundamental American story about incredible courage, perseverance, and that powerful universal search for a better life. Thinking about this history really helps us understand our country now. That larger journey for opportunity and fairness and a better future,
It didn't just stop in 1970. It's a story that's still unfolding all around us.